So what do you think of older FGC titles? And what do you think keeps them alive opposed to other competitive games like Madden or FIFA?
Legitimately, I think the first thing that came to my mind is like arcade culture.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these games that are played now, like, Vampire Savior is probably like my favorite fighting game. That game didn't really exist in the West until it was released again on 360 and PS3. Like it wasn't really at majors or anything. The scene, like a lot of the like scene that we know of, like, like the really good players in America, they all
Mm-hmm.
started in like 2012 or whatever with that re-release. But we all like learned from how Japan was like keeping that game alive for like with no re-release for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of these games, and actually a big point in my EX3 video where I talk about how why Street Fighter EX3 has like a bad reputation is, I believe one of the biggest reasons is because it never had an arcade release, so it never
Mm.
had a scene keeping that game alive in the first place. So whenever you try to look up any discussion on EX3, it's always like, why does EX3 suck? Because like EGM said it sucked 20 years ago. People who don't play fighting games said it sucked 20 years ago. And if it had like some kind of arcade scene keeping that alive, I think like we wouldn't have this stigma on EX3. So, because you would look up EX3 and see tournaments for it and see people talking about tech for this game, sort of thing,
Yeah.
you know?
I
So,
think it's always like the casual opinion level versus the like. I've been in this for like 5 years, and I might be in too deep, but I know what I'm talking about in opinion culture. Where
Yeah.
obviously like one takes more time and
yeah.
investiture, and it's generally the quiet opinion. But then again, like as it compared to the people who have never played the game or looked at it once and just didn't get it. And I think fighting games now in the West kind of benefit in that like, oh, a lot of them are available enough either through emulation or online that enough people in America have played them to actually give a counter opinion to the
Yeah.
guy who never plays fighting games and like literally just reviewed it because he got paid to and didn't care. You know what I mean?
And also, I guess that leads into the second point is, at that time, there was also like too many fighting games coming out. There was like a fighting game fatigue. So I think another reason why these older titles have stuck around is because of the quote unquote dark ages,
Mm-hmm.
where there was like a period where, new Capcom mostly fighting games weren't coming out. So those fighting games that were left behind, Third Strike, CVS2, Super Turbo, that's all they had for those years. So it just kind of cemented itself as like, these are the games that we play.
Yeah.
So maybe in like an alternate universe where like Street Fighter 3 was super successful and they released Street Fighter 4 in like 2004 or something, we wouldn't like, maybe these games would be around, but they wouldn't like have the same kind of dedication and scene. Maybe you wouldn't have a co-op for Third Strike, because Third Strike was able to, these players were able to become super good at Third Strike because that was it.
Yeah.
This is the game that we had for the next 10 years sort of situation. And also, I think it's just like legacy at this point. So, Super Turbo is always going to be Super Turbo. It's going to be a cool game. We're going to keep these around. And one more I just thought of.
Well,
Unlike Madden and stuff, like these per title, Street Fighter 2 is a different game from Street Fighter 3, like completely. So they can stand on their own. So that's another reason why, maybe other genres don't have the same kind of like legacy to like certain titles as we do.
Yeah.
I always respected that a lot about the Street Fighter franchise though, is they're willing to make each game different. Like I would say Mortal Kombat is getting there, but like they've never just had the success that Capcom has, because again, Capcom is willing to like throw out their whole formula and be like, let's do something new. Like I don't care what the old game was, let's do something new, which is insane to me as a game developer, but it's awesome to watch.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's like, there's no real Street Fighter. I think what most people think Street Fighter is, like the idea in their head, is probably closer to something like Alpha 2 to like any other game. But even Alpha 2 has like air blocking and stuff, and that's not something you would necessarily think is in a Street Fighter game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that's like you're right. That is like really crazy how like every Street Fighter is like this is a brand new game. But I do want to say I feel like MK9, MK10, MK11 are like totally different games.
No,
In my
no,
opinion.
For sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They, like as I said, I think I always have this joke with these guys about how like NRS is literally the like always a bridesmaid, never the bride of the FGC, because they'll continually try to do what people ask every game, like add new stuff, give you custom combos in tournaments. You know, the thing they complained about last game, they put in this game, and still people are like, nah, it's an NRS game. We don't love you anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how it's like, and we'll kind of get to it. It's like Capcom does a single player campaign. Mortal Kombat has done that, right? But Capcom's like, everyone's like, well, this is the best. No one's ever done this before in a fighting game. But it's like
I can't believe it.
NRS has pretty much done this in the past with you know,
Yeah,
with
I think
fighting
there's,
games.
I think there's a crazy statistic with like MK10 or 11 that I heard that like 3% of the player base have like unlocked the achievement to like play online. You know? Because
Oh,
like that's how massive those games are, and like that's how much like
yeah.
The story modes, yeah.
you know the casual audience is like, hey, I'll just play this for a week and you know whatever. So, but yeah, even within the FGC, it's kind of sad because they just play so differently that like, yeah, I'm not gonna say it's like the FGC and Smash how those two relationships are,
Mhm.
but it does really feel like that. There's like the FGC, then there's like the NRS FGC
Yeah.
sometimes.
It honestly feels that way with, like you said, feels that way with Smash. Like, it feels like Smash is a different entity, which is
Yeah,
probably why people seemingly think it's not a fighting game or something. I don't.
Yeah. There's just
It
like
seems to be always pushing forward, like
Yeah.
I would
trying new things.
I
every
would
time,
I can't say this like super statistically.
other than Brawl.
I'm sure this is like this could be wrong, but I'm sure like the crossover between like you know Street Fighter and like anime games and every other game is much more than like Street Fighter and even Mortal Kombat, like that crossover, you know? I feel like NRS players play NRS games a lot of the time.
But then
Yeah.
again, there was a lot of people who did crossover from 11 because 11 I think was the most traditional fighting game one they've made. Like it was the most footsie heavy fighting game. Because there were a
Yeah.
lot of people that went from 11 to Strive,
You know,
11 to SF5. So
11 is interesting just because I feel like, you know, 10 was a very volatile game, like leaning very strongly towards a certain very rush down oriented like mix up game. It's like that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that game is like a brutal, hard, fast paced game. So the obvious reaction from NRS is like, okay, we're gonna slow it down like a whole bunch. But
Cut the game speed in half.
yeah, but for whatever reason, like yeah, like everyone like they're you know, MKX is like beloved, but like MK11 has like a sort of negative stigma attached to it, sadly.
Which is
I think
funny
at the
because like
end of the day, people just prefer the 50-50 over the zoning that MK11 kind of became.
But like it's not injustice. It was like that's what I always found funny about MK11 to MK10 is that they were like all the things you complained about for 10 we changed for 11. But like 11 still gets no respect, and it's like I feel
mean,
like NRS is always like what haven't we done? Like what
I mean,
can we do?
Capcom did the exact same thing with 5. You know, I think they listened to like everything that people hated. You know, I'm sure you guys remember like at the end of Street Fighter 4, like that game was like hated, like extremely hard.
Yeah.
Like Sleep Fighter was like the ultimate thing, like it was called, and you know, Street Fighter 5 like removed a lot of that and made the game messed up in an entirely different way. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny because like I still think like Street Fighter 5, like for as much like flack as like people give it or whatever, even though it's like obviously a good game now, I think that's like the most stressful fighting game I've ever played.
Oh,
like
it's yeah.
literally like that game feels so volatile in a way that like I get hit in that game, I'm like, all right, fuck it, like pack it up. Like I don't
Yeah.
want
Bang it up.
I'm
It
putting
feels like
down
you're
the controller.
constantly about to be like. It feels like you're constantly about to be hit for like 50%,
No,
especially
yeah.
if your opponent gets V trigger, because then you're just like, I don't even know what's going on.
And I think that was like the first, like, you know, the esportsification of fighting game. This is gonna be inevitable no matter what. Like, all these fighting games are going to like become about frame data, you know, obviously. But I feel like Street Fighter 5, at least like for me, my experience at my locals and stuff, that was the first time where like after every single match, someone would put out their phone, look up the frame data, put up like it became Math Fighter, you know? And also like how the game feels, I feel like there's a more emphasis on that because like the game feel is more ambiguous where like, you know, you can block a fierce punch, but like I don't know if I'm safe, you know? Because like of how the game's like designed. But like in other games where options were much more ignorant, like frame data, you know, like if you block a sweep in Super Turbo, I mean obviously it's gonna get canceled in a fireball. But if you just blocked a raw sweep, like you could just like instinctively feel that like, oh, I can't do shit about this. I just have to block it, you know? Like I
Yeah.
can't punish this.
Hold
But
this.
that's another rant, sorry.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, I just remember feeling like playing Street Fighter 5 was like playing in quicksand. Is really what it felt like, because it felt like every time I did anything, like how do I put this? Like I had like jumping is incredibly rewarded in that game, and that always made me angry because
Yeah.
it's like you jumped, I tried to anti-air, but you know, whatever, you beat me out. Or it just felt like there were times where I'd play people and all they did was like I'd sit there, I try to get them to stop jumping, right? Because that's like one of the first things you do in Street Fighter is like before I do anything, he's got to stop jumping, because if he keeps jumping, I can't combo him. So it's like I sit there, he jumps, I anti-air. He jumps, I anti. You know, he just keeps freaking jumping, because he's just hoping that one time you're not gonna jab him out of the air, and he's gonna do like way more damage than your anti-airs could ever dream of.
But as a
So
result, it made that game so much more dynamic. Like it was more almost like KOF, where like jumping was encouraged. Because in 4 you get punished super heavily for jump. 5, it's like, yeah, sure, jump. Like they might punish you heavily, they might not, but it made it almost feel like SF2. Like in my mind, Street Fighter 5 is the SF2 of modern fighting games, because they
What do you-
simplified everything, but they also
What do you-
like made it like way more in your face. But like
Well, I
I
guess-
maybe I don't play enough SF2 to know.
You
I
had
don't
some
know.
hot takes today.
That's a wild ass take right there.
It's a wild take, but you know what? We love you for it, August. I don't know if I
Did you hear
completely
it
agree.
on Reddit? I don't
Did you hear
know.
that already?
Think about it.
I mean, anytime I've gone flat because at my locals I've compared like Street Fighter 5 to like Third Strike and stuff because of how like how the priority system and stuff works, and you know the Third Strike players are like don't even like how dare you even compare this game? To
Feels
so-
insulted, like you spit on your shoes.
Don't ever talk to us again.
Don't look at me.
Disgusting.
I'm a Third Strike player. You can't even talk to me.